Hello guys, welcome to the Parson series, and this is part 4 of chapter number 7. Last time we have discussed some of the amazing concepts related to the photophobia, the glare, photopsia, the Finchem's stenopic slit test, and today we are going to deal with the visual hallucinations. If you remember, I told you that how we can integrate ophthalmology with every subject, and we were discussing about the psycho-ophthalmology. That is a term I have coined, the psycho-ophthalmology here. So the visual hallucinations, I think, is a part of that. And what are visual hallucinations? Let us see what they are saying. These are actually the objects, shapes or lights which are seen by the patients, which are not visible to other persons in the vicinity, and they are fairly specific for disorders involving the cerebral cortex. Now, I think they have used the words quite relentlessly here. They are not saying that which are not existing actually. They are saying that the person is seeing those objects, shapes and lights which are not visible by the other persons, right? So, they are basically due to the disorders of the cerebral cortex. Unformed visual hallucinations consist of seeing the distorted lights like flashes, spots, line, objects or shapes, and are symptoms of lesions affecting the occipital cortex. This can be found in the migraine, arteriovenous malformations also. So there can be formed visual hallucinations where you are having particular shapes, objects and light. You can also have unformed visual hallucinations where you are seeing just the flashes, spots, lines, objects, shapes, and these are the symptoms of the occipital cortex, may be involved in the migraine, the AV malformations. Now, formed visual hallucinations could be there, as I was explaining that they will be well formed things. It could be animals, it could be objects, it could be people having specific localizing value indicating a lesions affecting the temporal lobe. So the formed visual hallucinations are something that you should relate with the lesions of the temporal cortex. We can have the temporal lobe tumors and the epilepsy. The formed images could also be the misinterpretation of the information in the brain, maybe the disruption of the areas, right? In the Charles Bonnet syndrome, people having a gross diminution of vision, and that actually probably represent an attempt by the brain to interpret any visual information which is received and forms a mental picture corresponding to the stimulus. So they are giving you an insight that whenever the patient is coming to you, what happens, very few people are actually aware enough and they actually do not come to know, because obviously what they are saying others are not seeing, so they do not know that others are not seeing. And it is when you know, these incidents take place couple of times and they say that this is seen, but other people say denies. They say that we cannot see these things. Then they come to know they are hallucinations, and then they should be aware enough, or their family members should be well aware that these are hallucinations and to be seen by the psychotherapy people. Otherwise, mostly they are coming to the ophthalmology people. So we should have knowledge about it, and we should know how to tackle these kind of things and how to refer these patients. So visual hallucination can also be due to the transitory or chronic abnormalities in the brain. They can be caused by the changes in the electrolyte disturbances, high grade fever, liver and kidney failure, drugs like diazepam, alprazolam or the LSD, and also in the patients of Parkinsonism. So these are the questions which could be expected from you, like visual hallucinations can be occurring in all these conditions. And we know that whenever the patients are having high grade fever, there could be altered sensorium, and there also patient starts having the visual hallucinations, the liver failures, the kidney failures. And we also know that certain drugs, and as I always say that nowadays all the ocular side effects of the systemic drugs are pretty important. They are being asked in one way or the other. So you should know about the diazepam, alprazolam and the LSD, right? Now next is your scintillating scotometa. Scintillating scotometa, these of various kinds, they are occurring in the migraine. In the typical migraine, what is happening? The patient feels unwell before the attack. So there is a kind of aura, and a patient actually knows from the very beginning that there is something which is not right. Their feeling of being unwell is there in them. A positive scotoma is appearing. I think everybody knows what is a positive scotoma by now. I always tell this in classes also. Scotoma is a blind spot, and positive positive scotoma is something which can be perceived by the patient. So if the scotoma can be perceived by the patient, that becomes your positive scotoma. It appears in the field of vision, and while obscuring sight, it has a peculiar shimmering character. It gradually increases in size. Ultimately, whole of this one half is clouded, while the fixation point remains relatively clear. So there are different kind of symptoms that can appear with respect to the blind spot also. Then there is something called as the dichopsia. Dichopsia means what? So let's see here, the bright spots and the rays of various colors are often seen. Frequently they are arranged in the zigzag. So these are called as the fortification spectra. You are having, you know, various kind of patterns, mostly the zigzag patterns. That is actually called as a dichopsia. Both half fields are usually affected, so that there is homonymous hemianopia. So when this kind of a lesion occurs, what is happening? Both half of the fields are going and same half of the fields are going. That is why it is also called as the homonymous hemianopia. In other cases, the whole field may also be clouded, but in spite of this, fixation point is usually seen momentarily and then it becomes obscured. Vision usually clears in about a quarter of an hour. So it is usually a sudden attack, a temporary attack, acute attack, but the attack is soon followed by the violent headache is there, generally intensified on the side opposite to that hemianopic field. And now because the vision loss and the field affected is opposite, so we have got hemicrania accompanied with the nausea, even sickness is there. So this is also a bilious attack. So you should be familiar with these kind of terms when they are using, and what are the things that you have to think for, what are the subjects, what are the topics, what are the branches that you have to think for when they are using this kind of term, because mostly you are getting integrated questions from neurology and ophthalmology also related to these, because you know their symptomatology, their expression is ophthalmology, but usually the cause will be going back to the medicine. So usually you get such kind of questions there, right? During the attack, what are the other things that you are going to get? You will get the numbness in the mouth and the tongue, then you will get aphasia as well as copious secretion of urine flow. Then attack gradually occurs periodically but greatly in number, and in mild attacks, especially as the age advances, scotoma may occur without the headache or the headache without scotoma. As the age is advancing, like in the early instances, we get the headache, we get scotomas, but as the age advances, it's not necessary that you get both the things. You may get only headache, you may get only scotoma, right? Migraine is attributed to vasomotor changes in the brain. Now again, migraine is one topic which is you know, nicely distributed among ophthalmology and the medicine people, because again the symptoms are belonging to ophthalmology and the cause is going to the vasomotor changes in the brain. So we have got a vasodilatation. Vasodilatation is there in the brain, which is bringing a feeling of well-being, followed by vasoconstriction, especially in the occipital cortex and occipital lobe. Occipital lobe will have occipital cortex, and occipital cortex contains the visual pathway. So the best measures to combat the attacks, we have to give rest, warmth and sleep. These are the best things. A person who is having migraine should take ample of rest. Cold actually precipitates it, and sleep is very, very important. They can sometimes be warded off by the dihydroergotamine and tryptophan. So sumatriptan and all these things are obviously well-known treatments of migraine. Occasionally the people who suffer from ordinary migraine, those people who are having ordinary migraine, they also have attacks. Now these attacks are not having any scotoma. Headache is followed by the partial paralysis of the third nerve. So that is why, you know, many cases we get confused whether it's migraine or it is some other things which is causing ophthalmoplegia, because even migraine can be associated with the partial paralysis of the third nerve, ophthalmoplegic migraine. So if you remember, you must have seen this term ophthalmoplegic migraine. So it is the ophthalmoplegia which is occurring in the cases of migraine on the same side, and the important thing is that this is occurring on the same side as that of the hemicrania. The sides are very important when you are dealing with such kind of syndromes. Slight you can have ptosis, diplopia, sluggishness of the pupillary reactions continue for some hours, and then gradually it becomes disappearing. The paresis is worse and persists longer with the succeeding attacks, and sometimes eventually they become permanent also. Probably most of the cases are not migrainous but are due to some organic level lesions such as pressure on the third nerve by a distended artery. Now you have to take care that if this ophthalmoplegia is due to the migraine, then slowly and gradually it will decrease in duration, decrease in frequency, and ultimately it will disappear. But if it is not occurring in that manner, then you have to think in certain other directions. Most probably it is not migraine, maybe it is some localized lesion, surgical cause maybe, or it can be a pressure over the third nerve by a distended artery. Then another important thing is your uniocular diplopia. Uniocular diplopia we usually talk about in cases of early cataract or the incipient cataract. Yes, it is frequent in the senile cataract, especially in the early stages where you are having the multiple images of the object. So try to dissect this word uniocular. Uniocular means one eye, and usually it is not diplopia, it is polyopia. Not only two images, it can be polyopia, means many, poly means many or multiple, and opia means images. So multiple images from one eye are seen. This is usually due to the uneven opacification occurring in the early stages of the cataract, because we have got uneven opacification which is taking place through the well hydrated areas in the immature senile cataract. So in the early cases of cataract, maybe it goes up to the immature cataract, but obviously not in mature cataract, because once the cataract becomes mature, you have got even kind of opacification and you will cease to have multiple images then. Patients who are having the subluxated lens may see two images. So if they are talking specifically about the uniocular diplopia, two images from one eye, then it's very unlikely that it is cataract, because cataract is having uneven opacification that will give rise to multiple images. That means maybe there is a one single cause. So that could be due to the subluxated lens, because if it is a subluxated lens, it is something like this. Okay, suppose this is your pupil and lens has gone up. Maybe there is a superior subluxation, so lens is like this. So one area will be having this pseudophakia. One area will be pseudophakia because this is lens, and one area will be becoming aphakic. So there will be aphakia. So obviously this image will be different and this image will be different, and the person will start having the diplopia. So the similar thing they are saying, that one through the aphakic area and one through the phakic area. Larger iridotomies, those people who have undergone the large iridotomies, okay, especially if it is not below the upper eyelid, because the upper 2 mm of the cornea is covered by the upper eyelid. So if it is not going and if it's not hidden by the upper eyelid, that can also lead to uniocular diplopia. So when they are asking you, these are the two most common causes. If they are asking specifically about the uniocular diplopia, then think about two important causes. One is your subluxation of the lens and second is the larger iridotomies. A rare cause is your folded over retinal flap in the giant retinal tears. Sometimes what happens that the retinal tear, that is more than a quadrant, very very large, so there is a folding of that retina. So that is why also one area will be different and another area will be different. So one image is seen by the macula and other image is due to the displaced retina. So if I talk about uniocular polyopia, think about the cataract. If I talk about uniocular diplopia, then think about the subluxation of the lens, think about the iridotomy, especially not the superior ones, think about the folded flaps in the retinal tears. All right. Now we are talking about the colored vision. This is chromatopsia. See, here I am not talking about the color blindness, I am talking about the colored vision. When you are having the different colored images seen due to the different diseases, that is actually called as a chromatopsia. So this is a very very rare symptom, not very commonly found, and therefore the DD is entirely different. We can have different kind of colors, like we can have a red vision, so that will be called as the erythropsia. Erythropsia is seen in the patients after the cataract extraction when they are exposed to the bright light and object looks red there. but the visual acuity is not affected, and there is no permanent damage. It will go with itself. The patient should be warned that there can be a possibility of erythropsia, as it is somewhat alarming and suggestive of the hemorrhage. Now usually it will go on, but sometimes you have to warn the patient that if you are getting erythropsia, maybe it is a sign of hemorrhage. So patients should obviously always inform if they are having this erythropsia or the red colored vision. On the other hand, some patients will give you excessive bluish appearance of the objects, because blue light was filtered out by the yellowish cataract nucleus before the surgery, also met with the snow blindness. So bluish one you are having in the patients after the cataract extraction, and in the snow blindness also, because what happens when they were having the nuclear cataract, there was a lot of pigment deposition in the center, that is the nucleus. Especially if I am talking about the amber colored and brownish pigments, so they are absorbing the blue light. So suddenly when the lens is extracted, now they start seeing more of blue, or it can be due to the snow blindness, more of blue light reflected from the surface of the snow. In normal people, black print will sometimes suddenly turn deep red owing to the strong lateral light entering the eye through the sclera. So sometimes this is not always found. Sometimes they can also get a very strong light, that is your black light, which is entering and that is turning deep red. Okay, so we have nicely dealt with so many clinical symptoms and how these symptoms can be integrating ophthalmology with the different subjects, then how you can see the different kind of clinical symptoms and what are the DDs that you have to think about, how to deal with the clinical scenarios which are having these particular symptoms, how to differentiate the malingering with the hysteria, how to differentiate the photophobia from the glare, what should you think when you have photopsia, when will you have uniocular diplopia, and when you will have the uniocular polyopia, and lots more. So ocular symptoms can highlight the involvement of different zones of the eye. Like they say that whenever we are having the acute red eye, think about cornea conjunctiva and the uveitis, think about the keratitis, the keratoconjunctivitis, the acute angle closure glaucoma, the iridocyclitis, right? They can also relate to the central nervous system. There were so many things that were relating it towards the central nervous system. Like one good example was the visual hallucinations, and then we can also have asthenopia, binocular diplopia, and squint. All these are relating towards the motility problem as well as the binocular coordination. We can also have the ocular surface problems, where the symptoms were irritation, foreign body sensation, watering, pain, and photophobia, and the redness. Then we can also have the visual hallucinations, visual disturbances of different kinds. They can relate to disorders of the different parts. It's refractive apparatus, the visual pathways. We can have the metamorphopsia, where you have to think about the macular diseases. We can also have the scintillating scotomas that you can have in cases of the migraine. So I think this was a quite high-yield chapter, and everybody who is reading ophthalmology should obviously go for it. If you are a third year student, when you are very new, before attending your OPD postings, you should go through it, because you will see only what your mind knows. So if you already know that what kind of things you can have there, what are the symptoms, if you are having this particular symptom, then what should be the approach, what you should think for, then that will become very easy for you. Same happens with the internship postings. If you are a first year resident in PG ophthalmology, then again you should go for it, because when you are reading the ophthalmology as a NEET PG aspirant, then it is only one of the 19 subjects, and when you reach to the PG, obviously you have to focus more. You are just blank there when you are going in the OPDs, because till now you have seen just the theoretical stuff. So times are changing now, you have to move towards the clinical one. So again, that becomes very important. Please do like the video. Please tell me in the comment section how do you like the video, and please also share the video as far as possible. Please share the video so that we can help those people who are not able to go to the postings, or who are attending the postings and finding some difficulty in assessing. Thank you, and happy ophthalmology.